Good afternoon. I'm Avi Hyman, Israeli government spokesman. Today is the 27th of March, 2024, day 173 of the October 7th war. 173 days on, our war aims remain the same. Destroy Hamas, bring home the hostages, ensure that Gaza never becomes a threat to us again. We start today with some tragic news. The IDF has informed the family of 35-year-old Uriel Baruch, who was abducted from the Supernova Festival on October 7th, that they now know he was murdered by Hamas. His body is still cruelly being held hostage in Gaza. Uriel was married to Racheli and was a father of 2 children, aged 8 and 5. This morning, a barrage of 30 Hezbollah rockets pummeled northern Israel. Sadly, 1 Israeli civilian was pronounced dead on the scene after being pulled out of burning rubble in the town of Kiryat Shmona. Zaher Bashara was a resident of the Druze village of Ein Kineh in the Golan Heights. He was at work when he lost his life in this mindless act of terror. Our hearts go out to the Bashara and Baruch families in their time of grief. May they be comforted among all the mourners of Zion, and may they know no more suffering. Terror knows no bounds. These 2 Israeli civilians were cut down in their prime because they were Israeli. Hamas and Hezbollah does not differentiate between who we voted for, who we pray to, or what we believe. They seek the total destruction of Israel and everyone in it. Yesterday, we were all exposed to the shocking testimony of lawyer Amit Susna, who was taken hostage from her home on October 7th. Amit bravely told the New York Times about how she was sexually abused at gunpoint by Hamas in captivity. Her evidence demonstrates the cruelty of the Hamas terror army, horrific crimes against humanity, against women, children, and the elderly. On the issue of the recent United Nations Security Council resolution, I want to provide some clarity. While the resolution does mention hostages, it doesn't link a ceasefire with a hostage deal. That had been the American position for the last 5.5 months, that any hostage deal should be linked to a ceasefire. Unfortunately, this latest resolution separated those 2 issues. Now, this can easily be checked. It's black and white. It's on the UN site. Hamas and Iran both celebrated and welcomed the resolution. As our Minister of Strategic Affairs, Ron Dermer, said yesterday, quote, "I think it's safe to say that when Hamas and Iran celebrate and welcome a UN Security Council resolution, it's not a good resolution. Certainly not for Israel, but frankly, it's not a good resolution for the United States of America, because those are not your friends, those are your enemies," end quote. So what was the effect of the UN Security Council resolution on hostage release negotiations? We had negotiators in Qatar. The message that it sent to Hamas was clear. Hey, you can get a ceasefire without doing a hostage deal, which is exactly what Hamas wanted from the start. Needless to say, Hamas has rejected again and again every compromise proposed by the United States and repeats its extreme demands. I want to be clear on the Israeli position. As Ron Dermer said yesterday, quote, "No one in the world is going to force us into a ceasefire. We are committed to achieving victory. The Prime Minister has made it clear we'd like to do this victory with America by our side. They've been there for 5 months. We think our victory is your victory. We think it's very important for US interests in the region to stand with Israel until the end. but we have no choice. And if the US decides not to back us now, we'll have to finish the job. End quote. Again, that was a quote from Minister Ron Dermer. Now an update on our Special Forces operation in the Shifa hospital. This precise targeted action provides an excellent example of the IDF's modus operandi. Our commandos went into Shifa hospital, and until now we have killed 170 terrorists. We have captured around 900 terrorists from Hamas and Islamic Jihad. There have been 0 civilian casualties. I'll say that again, not a single civilian, patient, doctor, or medical staff member was harmed in this operation. Only terrorists. Now an update from COGAT, which coordinates humanitarian aid to Gaza. Yesterday, 4 mobile desalination units from UNICEF went into Gaza. Also, 258 humanitarian aid trucks went in. 166 of these carried over 7 million pounds of food. 125 packages of food were airdropped over Northern Gaza. Since the start of the war, over 18,000 aid trucks have gone in. If there is hunger, it's because Hamas steals aid and the UN are hopelessly inefficient in distributing it. That brings us to an end of today's briefing. I'll now take your questions in the chat. Please do state your name and the name of your outlet. Thank you.
Thank you. First question from the Washington Post. Do the negotiations to release the hostages continue in Qatar? And are there any Israeli representatives there?
What I can tell you is that Israel is committed to the release, unconditional release, of all of the hostages immediately. And we will continue to do our absolute utmost to bring about that release, to unite the hostages with their family. As I'm sure you can understand, lives hang on my very words, and I will not we will not be negotiating in the media. What I can say is that we will continue to use all diplomatic channels available to us to bring those hostages home.
Thank you. Question from Joel Pollack at Breitbart News. Israel seems to be fighting a war on 4 fronts, against Hamas in Gaza, against Hezbollah in Lebanon, against terrorists in the West Bank, and against the Houthis in the south. All of these groups are linked to Iran. Why is the focus on each individual group and not on the Iranian regime that is behind all of these groups?
Joel, thank you for the question. Our focus has always been on the Iranian axis of terror, wherever it raises its ugly head. We've said from the beginning of the war that it's very much like an octopus, the Iranian octopus run by the tyrants of Tehran. They seek to attack us through their proxies on multiple fronts, and we will take them out one by one when the time is right and at the time of our choosing. Currently, our main focus, as you know, is to free Gaza from Hamas. We're seeing increased activity on the northern border too, and we are returning fire to the source of fire. And we have made it clear to Hezbollah that if they raise the volume, we will raise the volume in turn and copy and paste Gaza onto Lebanon.
Thank you. Question from Carrie Khan at NPR. The Israeli government has said it will not work with UNRA anymore. Given that it's one of the major distributors of aid, who will the Israeli government work with in terms of aid delivery? And is Israel facilitating access to northern Gaza, where aid delivery is most difficult? Will Israel open the Erez crossing to aid trucks? And if not, why?
That's a lot of questions, so I'll try to take them one by one. Sorry, actually, you know what? Can I have that question again, and can you break it up, please, David?
Sure. First question is, the Israeli government has said it will not work with UNRWA anymore. Given that it's one of the major distributors of aid, who will the Israeli government work with in terms of aid delivery?
Okay. All right. So firstly, on UNRWA, we've made it very clear UNRWA is a front for Hamas. UNRWA members participated actively in the October 7th massacre. UNRWA schools educate to the hate of our people, and in many ways have been an inspiration to those that perpetrated the attacks upon us. UNRWA perpetuates the conflicts. We are doing our utmost to phase out our work with UNRWA. And the question is a bit strange because refugees all over the world seem to have agencies that can work with them and for them. When there's any type of natural disaster around the world, somehow there's agencies that can work with them. But over and over again, we're told that UNRWA is the only address in Gaza. UNRWA is the only address for Hamas, for the people of Gaza. We reject that. There are many international organizations. We're also working with the private sector. We are working to get aid into the north actively. But ultimately, the problem is not getting aid into Gaza, but rather getting it around Gaza and fighting against the clock before Hamas steals it and takes it to their underground layers.
The second part of the question was, is Israel facilitating access to northern Gaza, where aid delivery is most difficult?
I already answered that.
And the third part of the question is, will Israel open the Erez crossing to aid trucks, and if not, why?
Well, we know that the Erez crossing was one of the main places that the Hamas death squads used to plow it through our borders. We know that much of it was actually destroyed. So I will leave that for Kogat to announce if and when it's relevant. Currently, I don't have anything to add.
Okay, question from Brian Peach from the Washington Post. Is Israel willing or considering sending the delegation to Washington at another time? If not, will there be another venue for the planned dialogue between Israel and the Biden administration?
I will refer you to Minister Dermer's comments on multiple news channels yesterday, in which I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but he said that conversations between us and our American counterparts are ongoing on a very, very regular basis. Now, whether that means him and his delegation going to Washington or a telephone conversation or a meeting elsewhere, that's yet to be seen. But our communications with the Biden administration are ongoing and will continue in that way.
Question from Haley Bull from Scripps News. The Prime Minister's office put out a statement yesterday on the negotiations and the UN ceasefire deal. The State Department spokesman Matthew Miller said that the statement is inaccurate in almost every respect and it's unfair to the hostages and their families. The description of Hamas's response that has been aired in the public is from news reports. It's not the actual substance of the response, and I can tell you that response was prepared before the UN Security Council voted, not after it. Do you have a response?
I think I've made it quite clear in my statement what our issue was with the substance of that UN Security Council resolution. If there's no linkage between a temporary ceasefire or a ceasefire, call it what you will, if there's no linkage between a ceasefire and the release of the hostages, then you're essentially saying to Hamas, you can get your ceasefire, and then what about the hostages? These are not two separate items at all. Primary to our war aims is the release of the hostages. There will be no ceasefire, no humanitarian ceasefire, before we can get the hostages, as we have done in the past. We have proven in the past that both military pressure against Hamas and using the diplomatic channels open to us have enabled us to get around half of the hostages home. We will continue on that route.
Thank you. Question from Jim Williams at Zenga International News Service, Washington, D.C. Despite the non-binding resolution, yesterday Gallant was in Washington, D.C., and he was assured by Secretary Blinken, Secretary Austin, CIA Director Burns, that the U.S. stands by Israel and will continue to provide arms and whatever is needed to defeat Hamas. So how is the U.S. not behind Israel?
Let me make it clear. The United States of America is our closest ally, is our best of friends. The question here, what we're discussing here, is their abstention from the United Nations Security Council resolution. That resolution was unacceptable to us because, again, it didn't link the notion of a ceasefire and the release of the hostages, which is our primary goal. Our primary goal is to have the hostages released, to destroy Hamas, and to ensure that Gaza does not pose a threat to us. So we stand shoulder to shoulder, and I believe that the Americans, as the President has stated from day one, stands shoulder to shoulder with us on our war aims to destroy Hamas, bring home the hostages, and ensure that Gaza no longer poses a threat to Israel.
Thank you. That was the last question.
Thank you very much.